welcome to another episode of The Recovery Scene. I am your host, Leslie. If you like what you've heard in previous episodes or in this one, go ahead and like and subscribe, and don't forget to share. Tonight, I have Kimberly Shank on. Kimberly has, over 300,000 followers on TikTok, and she's got quite the story to share with us. So as always, I'm going to turn it over to her. Kimberly, thanks so much for being here and agreeing to be on The Recovery Scene on your birthday too. Happy birthday.
Yes, thank you. What a great way to end the birthday with talking about it. It is nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, so let's just get into it. Go ahead and start anywhere.
All right. I am a family of, let's see, 2 older sisters and a younger brother. My parents grew up poor and in really bad situations. So my dad was going to change that and break it. So he was all about working, providing money, and making sure we were well taken care of. And we were financially, but we lacked the emotional and love that we needed from a parent. My mom was around, but she had depression. She had postpartum depression really bad after my brother. So that was hard dealing with the mental health. And then, in 7th grade, my parents, they were fighting a lot and they got divorced, and it was hard going between 2 homes. And I was always the child that was out of control, that was wild. I just wasn't a bookworm. I liked to do things and explore, and I was always the black sheep. So they split up, they were divorced. And then during the divorce, it just got very hard on all of us. And we were always arguing and fighting. So my dad put me in counseling, and I just wasn't willing to open up. And I had so much hate just for everything and not being loved. So that just built up and built up. And then, I go through high school. I did all the athlete stuff. I played soccer. I had a scholarship for college, but I just wanted to party more. That's just where my brain was. I didn't want to miss out on all the fun, like straight FOMO of everything.
Right.
So didn't end up going to a college. And that's when I got my wisdom teeth taken out. And I had surgery for my wisdom teeth. And I took the pain meds as prescribed, and it was my last pill, literally the last pill in the bottle. And I took it, and I got a totally different feeling than before. And I don't know if it was the pain that was like gone, which is why. Okay. Stop. Wait. No. I gave them a gum thinking they'd be quiet.
So you mean like maybe because the pain was gone, now you felt the effect of the pill.
Correct. Yes. So I was in like so much pain that I just didn't understand, I just didn't feel anything. I'm like, I don't even think these work because the amount of pain that I was in, so then when that pill, I had that feeling, and I'm like, oh my God, these are great. And I had a refill. So I got the refill, and then that's when it got hooked and started. And it was easy to go around. Like, they were just so accessible, pills were, because then I just got them from the doctor. And then I got with my husband, who was, everybody's friend. He was the delivery guy,
Right. Now, is this still in high school?
This was when I was 20, about right when I got out of high school.
Oh, okay.
Right when I got out of high school, I had my wisdom teeth, and then that's when I got hooked on the drugs and partying. But right before actually I met my husband, I met my first son's father, which is funny because so I was on the pills, and my aunt, she's like, well, let's go for a ride. I can help you get pills, because I had asked her once. And she's like, yeah, I'll take you down and I'll get you something. And I ended up getting caught being in the bad side of town with her, and she had drugs on her. So they took me with them for being like accomplice with driving her, just to pretty much like scare me because I was so young. And then they're like, well, you need to go into some type of program, something. And that was the first time I got introduced into like treatment centers at all. And they asked me what drugs did I do. And I was like, I just do weed and I take pills, but I would get prescribed the pills. But when they looked at the bottle at that time, it was like 2 or 3 months old. And they're like, no, that just doesn't make sense. So
Right.
obviously you're doing something to buy them.
So this was kind of like wrong place, wrong time for you.
Yes. But in a sense, I think it was like a point to step in for me. It was one of the signs that I just completely missed and took the wrong path on again. For them to intervene, for me to stop. But it was definitely wrong place, wrong time. And then that's how I ended up meeting my first son's father, which was through that. And he was a drug dealer, unfortunately. Got pregnant by him, ended up not seeing him. He tried to have me have an abortion and I was just not for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the baby, never saw him. Then that's when I had met my husband because I was still doing pills at that time. I ended up going to a doctor because I was like, well, I need pills, so I'm going to go to a back doctor. Well, they ended up doing a test on my spine and they're like, well, you have degenerative discs, so we'll have to give you X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, wow, well, I guess I'm set. I don't have to worry about it. So I was getting pain pills from the pain doctor. And if I ran out too early, just the group I was in, they all had them.
Right.
Always.
Right.
So then it came down to my husband. I would always use all of his money and he didn't work. So it was just like, we were pretty much always broke. We were just trying to get money any way we could. If I did get a job, he would take the keys and I wouldn't be able to get to work, or he would just, beat me up and I'd go into work with black eyes and they'd say, you can't come in this way. Sorry, you just can't work here anymore. So it was hard for me to even keep a steady job when we first met. And then some reason I decided to marry him and the abuse continued. It got worse. My drug addiction got worse as well. And then that's when I had got pregnant with my daughter. But it was just throughout the whole 10 years, it was abuse and addiction. It was just a battle back and forth. And, when you're dealing with the trauma of the abuse and then your family shuts you out and they're just like, we're done with you. We don't want anything to do with you. It's hard because they don't trust you. You've said so many times, I'm going to get clean and I'm going to do this. And it's just
we
my
kind
parents
of lie ourselves into a corner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And his parents were there to always back him up and coddle him. So when I had my 2 other babies and I tested positive for weed, this was when it wasn't legal. So they're like, well, you definitely need a program again. So let's get you in. My husband was like, well, no, we're not going to do a program. We'll just let my parents take the 2 kids. And when CPS goes away, we'll get the kids back. Well, my addiction got worse. His drug dealing got worse. And then I ended up getting in trouble again for stealing. But it was with my dad. It was a family issue and he was trying to get me to stop drugs. So he was going to do anything he could.
Right.
Help, I guess. So I ended up going to jail for petty theft because I ended up going and I had my mom said, yes, I could. So I was redoing a house, long story short, redoing a house. My parents hated my husband. My dad and I were fighting. And there was the tools that my husband was using at the house, the new house. And my dad's like, well, we'll call the cops on him. I was like, no, there's no reason to call the cops on him. Just have him bring them to us. Just have him bring them back. So he was bringing them back and he was giving them to my dad. And my dad, it was like a weird setup. So the cops were all there. And I just looked at my mom like, what is wrong with you? My mom was in a spot like, once my dad has a choice, that's what my dad's going to do.
Right.
So he's like, I wanted to save her and get her away from him. And my dad tried so many times. And if you're an addict, you're not going to stop until you're ready. Mm-hmm. Even the same thing with abuse situations. You're not going to leave until you're ready to say I've had enough.
Right. And it's a double because you're, also being an addict, if he's the source,
Mm-hmm.
of where you're getting your stuff, you're not going to leave that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was rough all around.
No. And then when I was in trouble with that, I ended up going to jail. Went to treatment, but my husband was still selling and doing all that stuff. So when I came out of treatment, I found out he was in a big ring, I guess you could say. He was doing some stupid stuff and getting thousands shipped overseas.
Oh, wow.
In like lamps or vases, things like that he'd just have to break open. And it's like, you're going to do that right in front of my face. And it was very tempting. So then I went back to using again. And then the abuse started. He always would blame my addiction on my abuse, but yet he enabled it by giving it to me. So it was just like, it was a cycle.
Now, did he use?
This is what really messed me up. He would always say he never did. And I was like, there's no way, because he's up all night. He doesn't sleep in bed. There's just something that doesn't add up. And then come to find out, when our house got raided, he had to go to jail, and then he got tested and all this. And I found out he was doing lots of stuff. And I'm just like, wow, he was even hiding all of that from me. Like, it just completely blew my mind. And then that's when I finally woke up and I was like, this is it. I just can't do it anymore. 10 years of running and stealing and putting my body out there to be abused because we don't have money. It's just not worth it anymore. It's not worth it.
Right.
So that's when I went to the final rehab, did everything. And he's like, okay, we're going to get it right this time. There's no abuse. But once again, it happened. He didn't like my older son. It wasn't his. So I wanted to go to his game, and it was a bad situation, got abused. Then I finally pressed charges on him. And I had my last final child at that time. And I was hoping, like, if I do it right this time, I'm clean and I say the abuse, I'm going to be able to keep my daughter. There's going to be no issues whatsoever. Boy, was I wrong. I didn't have a house, obviously, because he went away. So he was our provider. What was I going to do? Press charges. He went to prison. His parents filed for emergency custody of my daughter. And I was totally sober, working the program, had nothing, no problems. But the courts were saying, because the child, my other two, were already with the grandparents, that it makes sense for the daughter, for my baby, to go with them. Which is wrong, because they just said, try in 2 years. Yeah, try in 2 years and you can get her back. You just have to get stable right now. Like, but I'm sober. That's the whole point of the last time, was me not being sober. I'm sober this time. Oh, you don't have enough sober time. It was just one excuse after another. And it's like, as addicts, how are we supposed to succeed if we're always getting told our addiction is what keeps holding us back and stuff? Right.
You're not in recovery enough. You aren't recovered enough. You haven't done right enough. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not saying you're cocky in your recovery or that you're never going to relapse or anything like that. It's just saying, like, just stop being so paranoid of what happened in the past and move on and try and realize that this is a new person. It's not the person that it was. And that's still what my in-laws and my ex are having issues believing. They just can't understand it because of how toxic we were, that who could be a good person, outside of the situation.
Right, which is interesting considering that he was also using and he was dealing.
Yes. And I will never forget this ever. The GAL said to me that a drug dealer is better than a drug addict.
Wow, really?
Yes. And I was just,
and for those that don't know, that's the Guardian at Lightem.
Yes. Yeah. So that just kind of blew my mind. And, being sober, you just wonder, how much more do I have to keep going? How much extra work do I need? You're already, once you're fresh and sober, you're getting paper trails, right, of your AA slips, people saying you were here at this time of day. And after you're out of that court, and who's gonna keep going to AA meetings and getting it stamped? I'm not.
Right.
I'm not.
Right.
They expect you, to have 4 years of paper trails of AAs or 5 years. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. They think literally that if you're 4 years or 5 years sober, you have to constantly be working the program. And here's the thing with it. AA groups, some of them are okay, but the old timers are very strict with stuff. They're very stuck by the book. And some meetings are harder for addicts or newer addicts to actually stay clean and deal with, to be honest, because the pressure is so hard. And some of them are very judgmental, especially with medications that you take, and that's not fair either.
Yeah, the courts really need to keep up because, now let me preface this with 12-step programs have saved a lot of lives, a lot of lives. But science has also come a long way. And, the first big book was written in the 1930s. That's an issue right there. And it's not that like I said, it's not that it doesn't still work, but the courts need to catch up with the fact that there are a lot of paths to recovery,
right?
Not just two,
Yes, right. I totally agree. Absolutely. Because here's the thing about it. As long as they're living that sober lifestyle, they're not stealing, they're not doing their old habits, that's considered being clean. Whether they're on MAT, whether they're in NA, whether they're in AA, or whatever their belief is, they are sober. They're living their best life right now. So it gets frustrating with the stereotypes, for sure. It absolutely does. And it seems like sometimes it gets more divided within the recovery community because of what each person's recovery is. Right. But they're missing the whole point. That's like, you're taking somebody else's inventory.
Right. Everybody just needs to stay in their own lane.
Yep.
And unless you are actually that person's sponsor, or, they have asked you to mentor them, let them be where they are. That's another thing that I learned in recovery. Let people be where they are. You cannot forcibly change somebody anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You cannot. So that's what it's hard. And along the way, the more sober you get, the more you become more aware of your triggers or the toxic people that made you so sick, or things like that. Each year that goes by, you get better and better with things and learning. So you really don't ever stop, because you're also getting to know who the real you is along the way. And that's a good thing to do too.
Right.
So it gets hard, and my family doesn't really understand it. My dad never really understood it. He just thinks it's a you choose to kind of thing. He doesn't understand everything behind it. And that gets frustrating, but I think he's starting to come around the more he's seeing, the further I get.
Right.
Because he's been so hurt by all this stuff, just with his child was never supposed to be an addict. He raised them the right way. And it's not him. It may have been things that have happened that have built up, but it's not him in the way that he's raised. It was bound to at least happen to one of us.
Well, now, so where does it stand, if you can even talk about it, where does it stand with you and your kids? Because I know that's been an ongoing battle that a lot of us on TikTok are like, Kimberly.
It's hard because, you gotta understand, when you're dealing with lawyers, they want the money. And if there is somebody, this is what I've learned, if there's a lawyer that tells you right off the bat, yes, you're going to win, I can get you this, leave them. Don't waste your time, because if there is an attorney that's actually, for you, let me put that on the thing, then they'll fight for you the whole entire way, no matter what. So that's what happened. January, I found this male lawyer, and, he's like, I'll get this all for you. So all of a sudden, 3 months in, he goes, your case was dismissed. There's nothing there. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's just dismissed. That doesn't happen. And he would not answer me at all. And then my kids are being withheld from me. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, I need information. And he's like, oh, nothing. You're supposed to go back to your normal visits. Like, everything's normal. We have to act like this case never existed. And I'm like, something fucking happened and nobody's telling me.
Right.
So then I hired a new attorney who was absolutely phenomenal. And she found out that my old attorney, was the one that actually ruined it and got my case dismissed because he didn't file paperwork like he was supposed to. So I'm now going after him for malpractice.
Oh, wow.
But I finally got my husband served. So the divorce papers is finally going through. And there'll be a round 3 in the courtroom for the custody battle again. And I know that with the attorney that I have, good things are going to happen. I was in juvenile court I don't know why I was in juvenile courts, because it was them. However, I'm getting divorced to the father, which is in domestic courts. The courts where I'm at are very cliquey. So if you don't have the correct attorney, and that's what sucks in a lot of counties, if you're going, up against somebody that's got a lot of money, you're going to need a good attorney. You're going to need somebody that knows the judges or the other attorneys or people to at least talk, because believe it or not, it just doesn't stay in the courtroom.
Right.
There's between judges and other attorneys, they'll take it to the other courtrooms. They'll take it, elsewhere.
Oh yeah, they'll take it out on the golf course.
Yeah,
or to dinner. Oh yes, I've been on both sides of the of the table. So because remember, I'm a sign language interpreter as well. So I've been there and have interpreted for the courts, and then I've also been standing there trying to look as innocent as possible. So yeah, both sides of the bench. But yeah, and I remember, a couple of the lawyers, and see, in certain jobs, you're invisible.
Yes.
Yes. I always said, like, being an interpreter might be right up there with being like a maid in a super rich household, or at the palace or something, because they just talk away, and it's like, oh yeah, that case will be fine because Judge so-and-so and I are, going to play golf at wherever, and I'm just like, yay, justice.
Oh my God.
It's mind bending. But yeah, I mean, it's like when people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And if it's not who you know, it's how much money you have, So sadly, these are just realities of life, but it's almost like, to me, what I've seen is justice prevails when you get to a point where nobody in that courtroom can deny, this person is a good mother, or this person's a good father, or, and so that's when things start to change, because they can play the game for a little while, but
once you start getting the paper trail, that's what really helps you to show the pattern and everything else. And it sucks, the part of being patient and waiting. That's the worst part, because you got to build it up before you can say it, obviously. So that's the worst part about it. But
and while you're doing that, you're away from your kids, and being a mother, that
watching them trying to be forced on some other woman to be their mother, and it's very hard because I could see straight through it. He's just being vindictive and evil, and they're just waiting for me to say, okay, I'm coming back. And that's not going to happen. That's not happening this time.
Right.
The day he got served with the divorce papers, he was so pissed. He put up a post on Facebook talking about, you can come after me, but you're not going to come after my kids. What are you talking about? One, the kids have nothing to do with the divorce between you and I. You're just pissed because I'm finally going after you for the divorce. It has nothing to do with me taking a loss that I lost with my kids. I'm still fighting for my kids. I just need to divorce you also. I'm not staying married to you while you're with some other woman in the house. Like, what?
Right. Yeah. Well, narcissists have a very hard time when somebody finally says enough. So.
Absolutely. Yes. And they'll play the game, and they'll continue to play it. And it sucks.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly, because they're so good at playing a great, person and have fake facade, and people fall for it. People absolutely fall for it. And it sucks because you got to be around them long enough to catch on. So.
Right. Well, tell us, like, court cases, etc. aside, how is life in recovery?
It's been good. I think my motivation more to stay sober now than anything is just to be like, I told you I could do it, like, one, not only that, just, honestly, anything out there right now is more than likely fentanyl, and you're going to die anyways. So you don't want to touch it. I mean, people are dying left and right, and that's really shitty. And I like to stay involved with it. There's a rehab center that's around me that I make bags for like shampoo and socks and just things that I didn't have when I was in treatment that I felt like they should have. So I'll
Right.
make those, and then I'll have a little card with my number on there. It's for them if they ever need to talk or stuff like that. So I definitely try to stay active in it. I don't try and get comfortable or complacent. Because once I start shutting off completely with that and forgetting my recovery, then, you're tense for a relapse. So it's
Right.
just, I got to always remind myself, I'm not just like everybody else. I got things that I got to be mindful of. But it's work, and for me, people take it differently. I'm on maintenance. I don't know how people feel about that. People have their own opinions, but I've tried being sober without it before, and it lasted for a year. So if I've managed to get 3.5 years on this, I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to break a good thing. So
Right. Right.
people struggle with it. But here's the thing, when you're used to taking so much milligrams of Percocet a day, switching to Suboxone, or I don't know about methadone, but switching to Suboxone, you don't feel it. If anything, you're going to end up having some withdrawals because you're nowhere near the milligram that you were on when you were using.
Right. Right. It's harm reduction, and it
Yeah.
saves a lot of lives.
Yes. Yeah. So it just stabilizes you. It keeps you from the cravings and things like that. And I am very grateful for it. And also, it helps because I get drug tested. I get held accountable as well. So I think right now it's just that helps with me to make sure that I'm being held accountable all the time and I don't need to slip.
Exactly. And now, how long do you have clean?
3.5 years.
Awesome. That's right. You just said that 3.5
Yeah,
years.
November
Right.
21st. It's actually my mom's birthday. It'll be 4 years.
So, oh, very cool. Very cool. And tell everybody where they can find you on TikTok.
At Kim Brule 44.
Right.
Yes. It'll go in great detail about everything that I didn't go through tonight.
Right. Right. And it's KIMBRULEE.
Yes.
And then it's an _4, right?
No, just regular 40.
Just regular 4. No, forget the underscore.
Yeah, that's in the email.
Right. That's the email, right? Oh my gosh, that's funny. Oh, well, we're definitely going to have you on again. And,
I don't really like how much detail or what, because there's a lot of crazy shit in between. But I just didn't know, censored. I didn't know what I could say, couldn't say, but there's just a lot. No matter what, when you're in addiction, it's hard because people push you away and you're not going to stop until you're ready to stop. And that's the one thing a lot of people don't understand. And if they could just love them and not enable them, it would be a lot easier.
Yeah. And on our show, the only thing that is off limits is whatever you don't want to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
there's a lot more we'll have to talk about.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, we'll definitely have you back, and you can tell more of your story, and you can also give us updates on how everything's going. But I really appreciate you being on here today and sharing your story. And then I did the old school live where I just put the phone up. So thanks everybody.
Love it.
And then, so yeah, definitely. We will definitely have you back. 100%. Absolutely. So that's going to do it for this episode of The Recovery Scene. Remember, addiction isn't pretty, but recovery is beautiful, and we'll see you next time.